Good day, I'm Dr. T and welcome to my office. So in a few videos ago, I went through setting up a D2L assignment page. And one of the features I checked on there was anonymous grading. And I think I was open in that video that I had not used this feature before because I didn't know it was there before. Well, now I've used it and I have thoughts. Overall, I think it's a good feature. I do really value the idea of blind grading. That removes kind of the appearance of bias and any bias that I might have towards one student or another. Typically, I'm so bad with names, it's not like I know who the student is anyhow. So it's more of removing the appearance of bias. That said, in case there's a student I happen to know their name and I have really strong opinions about for one reason or another, at least this way, that's hidden from me, so it's not going to bias my grading of their assignments. So I do think it's valuable. Now, D2L doesn't really explain what it's going to do or how it works. I had assumed that this was going to be very similar to the blind grading in quizzes, in which case, when you go into kind of the standard grading mode, it doesn't show you names, it just shows you answers, or in this case, I figured it would just show you the work that they generated in the standard rubric and whatnot. Which is all correct, except for it really does enforce the whole anonymous grading. There is no way, until you have submitted the grades, to know who did what. So if a student asks, hey, did my paper upload? It's like, I don't know. I have no idea. Until I've done grading, until the grades are submitted, I don't know who did what. So this has a few consequences. One, this makes academic integrity violation kind of inspections. You have to do that kind of after the fact. So once grades are submitted, the ones that got 100% turn it in, those get zeros. But of course, if they're flagged for their own paper, which I've had that happen, you're not going to realize that Bob Smith just plagiarized from Bob Smith, and thus it's like, wait, what? So you're not going to catch that because you don't know who you're grading. So academic integrity things, this actually does make it a little bit more complicated, as well as monitoring student progress. Especially for kind of larger projects, you want to see like, okay, are they turning them in? I'm not going to grade them yet. You're not technically due. I'm going to grade them as a batch, but like, are they turning things in? Or is the student not turning anything in at all kind of scenario? And do I need to be like, hey, everything okay? You just wait until the deadline. I recommend not waiting until the absolute deadline, that kind of stuff. You don't know who's turned in what. You can figure out how many you have turned in, although I did not realize this. I almost got myself in a bit of hot water. It's like, no one's turning things in because I was looking at the grade book to monitor how my class was turning things in. This is a class, it's online, it's summer, asynchronous. All the due dates except the final one are very flexible because that's the nature of an online course. I mean, that's why students do online courses, presumably, is for the flexibility. So I want to be flexible. So I'm like, okay, how are the students doing? Like, no one's turning in anything. The grade book is not showing anything being submitted because for the quizzes, you see that they've done their quiz. And you can kind of go around the anonymous features on the quiz, which, if you need to go figure out like, did this person copy from this other one? I've seen these two. Are they in the same group? If you want to do some investigation, you can do that. And you know who's done the quiz, who hasn't, that kind of stuff. But with the anonymous assignment upload, you only know that after you've published grades. So any investigations you want to do before publishing grades, you're out of luck. Now, once again, that's usually not a major thing. You can do your academic integrity investigations afterwards, typically. And of course, you can just throw turn in under the bus if you get any weird scenarios. It's not like we're not going to do that anyhow. I have heard some really weird schools, like once you publish the grade, you can't unpublish it and you can't reverse that if you discover academic integrity violations after the fact. Thankfully, I don't work for one of those schools. That's nuts. I suspect some of those schools have multiple issues, and they clearly don't value academic integrity. But with that said, that is obviously a caveat. But I should also point out that D2L builds are somewhat school specific. So they do change from semester to semester, and they will change from school to school depending on exactly how they're implemented. So my experience may vary slightly from yours depending on when you're watching this or from where you're watching this. But it is a nice feature. I like it. Once again, it's a little frustrating, so it's not like a win-win-win-win. It's more of like a win. It's still better than not doing it, though. So with that said, this is me from the future. So I've been having a second issue with D2L that I've got resolved, and you might run into it too, so I wanted to let you know. This goes on with quizzes and using anonymous grading. Actually, the anonymous grading on the quiz works quite straightforward and is not part of this problem per se. So when you go to grading, I can't do a screenshot of the grading, but I will show you a screenshot of the setup and the button I discovered I need to change. But when you go to grading, you can set it to anonymous, so it doesn't give you the student's grades, and you can set it to show you a whole bunch of different responses. Now, obviously, if you're using one of the, say, math or multiple choice-based ones where it just grades for you, great, yeah, that's done. Typically, though, when I'm using D2L, what I'm doing is using the written response one. So basically, I've got a timed essay. And so that has to be hand graded. So when you're going through to hand grade them, it gives you an option to drop down and put feedback. So I'm like, hey, that sounds great. I'm going to put feedback, why I took off points. This way, if the student's got any questions, they can just look at it. It's going to be straightforward. And if they're like challenging that particular assessment, hey, this is why I took off points, that kind of thing. I don't think there's a way to incorporate a rubric here. So, you know, this is kind of the rubric for this question kind of being added into this feedback box, kind of informally. Now, I had assumed that if I left feedback for them and I published their scores, the feedback would be published with it. And I kind of think in an earlier edition it probably was. But I found out about the same time I was resolving the issue with anonymous marking and not seeing the assignments, I discovered that no, they don't. Not with the default settings. See, when you are creating the assignment, you have something that looks like this, and there's a certain box there that is set up, and it makes perfect sense. Everything in that box looks like it's responding to automatically graded questions. D2L does not really explain what they're doing very well. Well, that's not what that box means. You have to change that box to something else. My understanding is literally anything else. And then the students will be able to see the feedback that you have left for them. Yeah, this is something that had to go up a couple levels of tech support. So if you are setting up written responses where you want students to see the feedback that you leave for them, that box needs to get changed. Okay, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in later videos.